Earlier on in this series, I spent a decent amount of time in vain trying to get ChatGPT to create debugging exercises. And, well, long story short, I kept asking for code with bugs and it would generate code without bugs. It would promise me there were bugs and then it would agree that there actually weren't bugs after all. When I asked it for code that had compile errors, it did generate that, but it wasn't very good at that either. All it could do was get rid of semicolons pretty much. But maybe that had something to do with the fact that we didn't have very much material to work with. Certainly, if we look at some of the later material in the course, there has to be some fodder for good debugging exercises there. Or, I don't know, I just want to believe that. So maybe we'll give ChatGPT another chance to do that. Okay, I'm going to start by asking it for a debugging exercises involving one exercise involving arrays and strings. So I don't want to get into dynamic memory or structure types, just arrays and strings. And then we'll see where we go from there. So I just learned about arrays and strings in C. Can you generate a debugging exercise that somehow involves arrays and strings? I will tell it I don't want dynamic memory. I don't want anything involving dynamic memory or structure types. We'll deal with that later. Of course! Well, of course, we'll see. Here's a simple debugging exercise. Now you see, it might be a little bit too simple. So we already know we're going to have to argue with it a bit. So I'm going to start by skimming. And of course, it's possible that it managed to stick a bug in there that's so impossible to notice, like that is so well hidden that I don't see it. But unless something looks a little bit suspicious, I'm going to be skeptical that there actually are any bugs. So what do we have? We've got two strings, string 1 and string 2. We concatenate them using loops. Okay, well, there's lots of ways we could have bugs with that. We print the concatenated string. We try and find its length. Okay, and a lot of this is a good way of revisiting some of the exercises we've already done. We then try and reverse it. Now, we should know that reversing a string, especially with this style of algorithm, is the kind of thing that could be error prone, and then we print that out. Okay, so before I go forward, we've already learned that we have to ask ChatGPT if it's really sure there are bugs. Before I look at this, are you absolutely sure that the code is not already going to work as expected? Furthermore, do you promise that there really are bugs in this code? Yeah, there we go. Here we go again. So it just doesn't understand what I mean when I say I want code with bugs in it. It does seem to get that I don't want working code. It's able to engage me in conversation, but it doesn't know how to do this. It says, oh, feel free to still look at it. Yeah, I'm not going to do that. I want a debugging exercise. Okay, whatever. Can you generate a debugging exercise like I requested? It is a useful skill to have to look at code and make sure that it does work. It's very valid for a debugging exercise to end with you saying, yeah, the code works after all. The problem is I want to have at least one set of code that doesn't work. What do we have here? We've got a message, a secret key. So this is vaguely hinting towards an encryption sort of task. I initialize the message array with the most absurd initializer pattern I can think of. It should know better than this because it's used a better initializer somewhere else. I then concatenate the secret key to the message. I print the secret message, and then I determine the length of the secret message. Okay, this is weird. So I have a feeling the code doesn't have any overt bugs. I think that the code is meant to implement a specification and it's not doing it properly. So that is, if I'll try copying this. If my suspicion is true and I run the code, maybe it'll be more clear what I'm thinking. So I'm going to run this. I'll just save it. I want practice debugging. There we go. Oh, unused variable. Well, that's yeah. So basically, it creates this message, hello, comma, space, and there's a secret key. And then it calls the message a secret message when it prints it out, which leads me to believe that the point of this program was supposed to be to do some kind of encryption, that is, to create an encrypted version of the message, which it isn't doing. It's just attaching the secret key to the message. So I suspect that maybe it considers this code to be incorrect because it doesn't implement the specification. The problem is it never told me the specification. So how do I know that that's the problem? I was more expecting it to give me bugs that I could actually detect. So this might give us a hint that there's a way of getting what we want. Okay, let's try again. So that's all right. I'll just leave it there. It's now gonna be nice and gracious and say, I'm glad to hear that. Okay, we'll start again. Can you generate another debugging exercise with the following criteria? I'm gonna ask it for a formal problem specification, which I expect to be correct. So I don't want there to be a bug in the specification. There's a time for that, but that's not now. Provide an incorrect implementation of that specification, which contains some bugs. Because I'm afraid that it might generate a perfect problem and then tell me the answer, I'm going to say, don't tell me what the bugs are. But I'm then going to say, tell me, when you provide the code, add line numbers to it. And then tell me how many lines contain bugs, but not which lines they are. And then don't use dynamic memory, because we haven't covered that, or I don't want to talk about that yet. Structure types or linked lists in the code, or require them in the specification. Well, I mean, this is as clear as I can be. Absolutely. Okay, so I've asked it now to give a specification. My hope is that way, if it generates a program that doesn't implement the specification, I will at least know what it's trying to do. The specification it gives is, write a program that takes an input string and counts the occurrences of each vowel, A, E, I, O, U, so it even tells me what the vowels are in case I'm confused about that, in case I want to know whether Y is a vowel. Print the count of each vowel in the format vowel:count. Here is the incorrect implementation. There are a number of lines with bugs. 3 lines contain bugs. Now, it didn't give me line numbers, which is a huge pain. Let's ask it. Can you repeat that code, but add line numbers to the code? And then, because it accidentally last time apparently wanted to tell me the answer at this point, don't tell me the answer to the question. Don't show me the solution. Just add the line numbers, and that's it. Okay, here's the code with line numbers added. Now, I'm still going to go copy the code without the line numbers. I just want to be able to talk about line numbers when I ask it about about what has a bug. Okay, so I'm going to go up here. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to hope for the best. Actually, well, it says there are 3 bugs. And I know that if I ask it a question like, are you sure there are 3 bugs? It's going to say, oh, you're right, there aren't 3 bugs, because it seems to want to agree with everything I say. So I'm going to find anything I can to debug. I just want a debugging exercise. I feel like this is something it should be able to do. So I'm going to start by running the code. I already see something that's horribly wrong about this code. And that's a good sign, because this is supposed to be a debugging exercise. Okay, so the first thing is it says implicit declaration of function getS. And this is neat because this is one of the bugs I spotted. This is a function that no longer exists in the language. And so it's supposed to, at least, give me a warning about it. It looks like it is giving me a warning. It is, I think, still going to compile. It's an unusual looking warning, but getS has been deleted from the language because getS is a dangerous function. It can create security problems. And you can see here the compiler on the one hand says, I don't know what this function is. Do you mean fgetS? Because I'm not supposed to know what getS is. It's been deleted. On the other hand, it then down here in this later stage of the compiler, at the linking stage, it says warning. The getS function is dangerous and should not be used. So it clearly does know what it is, but it also knows that we're not supposed to use it. It does look as if it did compile though. Yeah, it says enter a string. Okay, so I'll enter the string hello world. There are 3 vowels in this string. And it counts the vowels. Okay, there are actually some bugs. Okay, so the first bug, and we can argue about whether this is a logic error or a syntax error or something, is this is bad. It is a bug. It's not clear exactly what kind of a bug I want to call it, but the getS function has been deleted from the language. It has been deprecated and then deleted. It is not supposed to ever be used. The reason it's never supposed to be used is because it is dangerous. And the short answer for why it is dangerous is I want getS to read a string of text from the user. So I provide an array to read the text into. But I don't tell getS how long that array is, which means if the user enters a string that's too long, it's going to run off the end of the array. Now, in the best of times, with the most well-intentioned user, this might result in a crash of the program. But in the worst of times, with a malicious user, a user could deliberately provide a string that's too long in a certain format to begin the process of a malicious attack. So they could actually use this as a way of doing something up to and including taking over the computer or taking over the process that's running. So that's why getS is dangerous. So this is a bug. I shouldn't use getS at all. So note to fix this, stop using getS. So I could use fgetS for this. Okay, the next thing is it's supposed to count the number of vowels in my string. So it wants to print them in the form vowel:count. It's printed out vowel:count here, which is, to me, looks sort of like testing code that got left in, but whatever. I guess that could be considered a bug. And then it prints out 5 things, but they're the letters A, B, C, D, E, not A, E, I, O, U. Up here in the beginning of the code, it creates this array of length 5 vowel counts. So A, E, I, O, U. So index 0 is A, index 1 is E, and so on. We've got this loop. So beyond the use of getS, up until line 7, everything looks good. The getS is a problem. Line 10, it says int I. Okay, that's valid. Line 11, it appears to be that we are looping through the contents of input string. And if input string is valid, this is a valid loop over it, as far as I'm concerned. We take a look at the character at that position. If it's an A, we add 1 to vowel count 0. If it's an E, if it's an I, if it's an O, if it's a U, yeah, that all looks good. However, when we go to print this out, we don't actually print out the vowel. We instead print out the letter A plus the index. So A plus 0 is A, that's fine. But A plus 1 is supposed to be the letter E. This is the count for the letter E. There was 1 E in Hello World, and that's wrong because it's printing B. Okay, so I found that. That's another bug. So if I had to guess, if it says there are 3 lines with bugs, I'm going to say it's going to be line 8, which is the getS, line 30, which is this erroneous vowel count, and line 32. So I'm going to ask it if that's correct. I'm pleased that at least it generated code with something non-trivial wrong with it. Okay, I'm just going to verify that in the version with line numbers, yeah, line 8, line 30, and line 32. I'm noticing... And line 30 is a mild case. I mean, maybe it considers this a bug, but it doesn't want you to print the word vowel and the word count. It wants them printed in that format. So I'm going to consider that a bug. On line 8, line 30, and line 32. Is that correct? Okay. There was an error generating a response. Well, fair enough. I mean, at least it didn't apologize. You'll notice that this is the first time it hasn't apologized, and I did ask for some errors. I guess we're doing a debugging exercise. I wasn't expecting to debug ChatGPT. Let's just click regenerate. Maybe I've got a bad internet connection. You're on the right track. Okay, you've correctly identified the lines with bugs. Now thank you. Now go ahead and work on fixing those bugs. Well, I didn't ask to do that, but I guess I will. Was this response better or worse? Well, yeah, this was better. Okay, so I'm going to go back and try and fix those bugs. And then I'll see if it's willing to critique my code. So how do I fix the bug with getS? Well, the solution is don't use getS. I've got a couple of options. I want to read a string from a user. If this were an exam question, so what do you do instead of getS? Well, you're not supposed to know what getS is, so it wouldn't be that. But if I want to read a string from a user, I could use getchar to read the string character by hand. I could also use fgetS. FgetS is safe because unlike getS, fgetS takes the maximum size. So if I use fgetS, I give it input string, I say 50. Because I say the size of the array, fgetS has the ability to know when to stop. It knows how far to go before it stops because it's going to walk off the end of the array. Now you might be looking at this and saying, but wait a minute, fgetS is for reading from a file. I want to read from the user. And one interesting thing that you probably already know, you may have already seen this, is that any of the file functions, fscanf, fgetS, fprintf, fgetc, can be used to read from the user. There is this special global variable, stdin, or we read this as standard input in C. This is a file object, so an object of type file star, that refers to user input, because we can treat the user's input like a file, a very slow file. And so if I want to read from the user, I can use scanf, or I can use getchar or something, or I can use the file input functions, but give them stdin, standard input, as the file. So I'm going to try that as my alternative. The reason I'm going to do that instead of getchar is that fgetS is considered to be the file equivalent of getS, except that it's safe and getS is dangerous. So I'll try that. Now, how do I fix... So it did apparently agree that line 30 was a bug. So I'm going to delete line 30. That's my fix there. In my deleting it, I'm just going to sort of wipe it out, but leave the line the same as it is to try and keep things as lined up as possible. Now, how do I deal with this vowel situation? Well, one option would be I could make a string with all the vowels in it. So I could say char star vowels equals A-E-I-O-U. And then when I want to get vowel number 0 or vowel number 1, I just index into my string. And connoisseurs will note, I don't even need a string here. I just need an array. I never need the null terminator, but why not? I'm used to arrays of characters being strings, so I'll let it be a string. And it allows me to initialize it very conveniently. So I'll try running that myself just to see whether my fix appears to work. Enter a string, hello world, press enter. It says there is one E and two O's. I'll try one other one. Oh, that doesn't work. So if I use all uppercase, that doesn't work. That's another bug. And strangely, it looks like ChatGPT, well, because I just used line numbers, it does feel like there is actually also a bug on line 12. I'm going to ask it if it can tell me what that is. So the reason I'm saying that is on line 12, I'm reading the input string and I'm counting the number of vowels. Now, depending on how we're doing this, maybe it only wants me to count lowercase vowels. Actually, I could ask it that. Is this program supposed to count lowercase vowels only? Or is it supposed to count both uppercase and lowercase vowels? We'll see what it says. The program is intended to count both lowercase and uppercase. Okay, so in that case, there is a problem because when I enter a string with uppercase letters, it doesn't work. If I had to guess the best, I don't know, like location of the bug, it's line 12, because if on line 12 we convert the letter to lowercase, so I call to lower, and that's going to require including ctype.h, then I could just count the lowercase version because everything is lowercase after that point. So I'm going to ask ChatGPT whether there's also a bug on what was previously line 12. So that would be the line I just modified was line 12 until I added that include statement. So in that case, is there also a bug on line 12? The reason I'm asking in a cryptic way is I want to see whether it figures out what the bug is. Yes, good. So the reason I said I gave it a very cryptic request because in general, I sort of doubt ChatGPT's ability to understand problems like this because of how bad it was previously. But here I said, is there a bug on line 12? It says yes, but I'm used to it always agreeing with me. The reason I asked it as a yes or no question is so I can ask it to tell me what the bug is, to prove that it actually knows. It says, yep, it's related to how the program handles uppercase vowels. Good catch. Thank you. Yes, it was a good catch. So I'm going to say to lower here, and then I'll go through and we will run this again. Enter a string, hello world. That still works. I'm going to try hello world all uppercase. It should still give the same output. Now I'm going to try a mixture of the two. So hello world, H-E-L-L-O, world. Okay, and that has what, 3 E's and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 O's. Yep, that looks good. I should make sure I test it on some words that don't contain just E's and A's. So what do we do? Or E's and O's. Raspberry, that contains A's and E's. Pineapple, that contains I's. Do I know any fruits that contain the letter U. I have to. Okay, pumpkin. There we go. I'm sure that, yeah, there's no way I couldn't think of at least one. Okay, so there are some examples of words that contain A's, I's, and U's. And it looks like it's counting those correctly. Okay, so I'm reasonably confident. I think that I fixed all the bugs. So it looks like I was looking for the right formula. If I ask for ChatGPT to give me a problem and a solution, then it makes a lot more sense for me to be able to find those bugs. So I'm going to copy my code, and I'm going to say, here is my fixed code. Here is my attempt at fixing the code. Let me know if I've missed anything. Now, I don't know if I trust it perfectly. Like, I could have missed something and it might not find it, but let's just see what it says. Your attempt looks great. You've correctly addressed the issues and made the necessary modifications. The usage of to-lower to handle both uppercase and lowercase vowels is a good approach, thank you. Additionally, using that string to simplify the loop is a nice improvement as well. Okay, that's good. The rest of the code structure looks good, and you're printing the vowel counts as required. Your revised code should work correctly and produce desired output. So I accept its feedback. I have to take it with a grain of salt because ChatGPT is very good at talking, but it isn't necessarily very good at doing analysis, so who knows? But that's fine. I'll call the exercise done. That was fun. I'm not going to say for a change. That was fun. Can you generate another exercise in the same style? Don't show me the solution. Of course, here's another debugging exercise. Okay, it's going to use getS again. It's like a one-trick pony, I guess. So write a program that takes a sentence as input and prints out the words in the sentence, the words in reverse order. So I rejected a programming exercise like this recently because it didn't fit the theme of the day. So this gives us a way of exploring that exercise anyway. So I'm going to copy this code. I'm going to head over here. I'll get a new file. I'll paste in the code that it produced, and then I'll stare at it. So this should be a nice exercise in, I think, arrays, because it's not only going to need strings. Okay, there's getS again. I should ask it for code with line numbers. Can you repeat that code but add line numbers? Question mark. Certainly, here we go. Okay, so I'll let that generate, and then we'll go take a look for the bugs. So I'll try running this. And I'm going to expect that it ideally should fail, although, of course, even if it runs correctly, it could still have bugs. And I'm in a much better mood this time because there is evidence there might actually be some bugs. So there's the getS function again. That's bad news. I suspect that the reason ChatGPT knows so much about getS and wants to use it so much is that it's ingested a lot of old C code, which uses getS. And it's also likely ingested a lot of written material by people saying that getS is bad. So ChatGPT probably knows that getS is bad. That's why it throws it into code like this. So that's obviously a bug. So I'm just going to flag that as a bug. Let's try running the code and see what it does. So it's supposed to take all the words in the sentence and print them out in reverse order. So I'll start with this sentence, hello world ASDF. I should get ASDF hello world. And it does seem to print that out, or ASDF world hello. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so do I know any other sentences? I don't have that many test sentences, like the quick brown fox jumped over the dog or something, jumped over the lazy dog. Okay, yeah, it looks like that's correct. So let's see. That means whatever bugs exist either have to be complicated, so I mean they have to only exist for a certain input, or they have to be something that I've just transparently missed. So I'm going to skip over because I think it told me that there are 2 lines with bugs. So I'm only going to look for 2 lines with bugs. All right, so let's take a look at what it does. First, it uses getS. That's a bug. Okay, so we're already done with that. Now, it seems like what we have next is, at the end, we've got this loop to print out the words in reverse order. I noticed that what it's doing is it counts the words somehow and then iterates backwards, starting at word count and counting downwards to print out all the words. I suspect that means this loop in the middle is figuring out what the words are and copying them over. So it looks to me like what we're doing is we iterate through our sentence, which is one long string, starting at index 0 and iterating up to the null terminator. We search for spaces, and to me this sounds like this is the part that's detecting if I've hit the end of the word. So if the sentence at this character isn't equal to a space, then it looks like what I'm doing is I'm storing the character from that sentence into this thing, words. Words is a 2D array of type char, which we can interpret as an array of strings. Each row of this 2D array is one string, or we could think of it, I guess in this context, as one word. So it looks like what's happening is if the character I'm looking at isn't a space, then I'm keeping track of the current word that I'm bringing in. So word count probably goes up over time as I bring in new words. And then word length is a variable referring to how long the current word is. So I'm copying in this character into the current word. And then if I hit a space, I add a null terminator to the current word, and I increment my word count, and I set my word length back to 0 because I'm starting a new word. Now this gives me a hint that maybe the problem, so one thing I can see that could be a bug here is, what if I have two spaces in a row? I'm gonna try running that on, so it's gonna give me that error again, fine. So I'll do hello and then a whole bunch of spaces and then world. And when it prints it back out, it actually prints it back out with all the spaces, because I think what it's doing is it's interpreting each space to be preceding another word. So I get a bunch of these sort of blank words between things. I don't know that that's incorrect behavior. That isn't necessarily the way I would approach this, but I guess that does fit the specification. It doesn't say you have to strip out all the extra spaces. Now, one thing I do notice, though, at the end is I start my downward loop at word count, and that looks a little bit suspicious. So I'm going to try printing out how many words there are. The word count is, and I'll print out the words, and actually I'm also going to print out the words in forwards order. So I'm going to loop over all the words from int I equals 0, I up to word count, I++. All right, and I just print out word whatever is, and then I print the word. I'll print the word in square brackets to make sure I can see what's actually stored inside of it. So that would be words I. And I'm going to do this because I have a suspicion that this is our second bug, and I don't want to be wrong about that. So I'm going to get it to give me some more feedback before I continue with my own test. So I'm going to type hello world. I expect there to be 2 words in this sentence. And it prints out that the word count is somehow 4. Okay, that's a little bit weird. Word 0 is hello, and that's sort of strange. So it looks like, yeah, word count, let's see, word count, oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So I noticed that it only increments word count if it encounters a space. So here is where word count gets incremented. And this is inside the else of this if statement, which means this is only going to happen if sentence sub I equals a space. Now, what's strange about that is that means that when I'm working on my final word, that would be the word world in this case, there is not going to be, I'm not going to increment word count. So when I come out of this loop, first off, the word count actually isn't full. Oh, well, okay, that's my fault. That was a bug I added. Let's run it again without that. Okay, hello world. Okay, the word count is 1, so it's not 4. The reason is I think after it's done grabbing that last word, it never increments word count because it can only do so if it's in this else. And it doesn't because the string is over. Okay, so what do I do about that? One thing I'll do is I'll see what happens if I print out, if I go up to and including word count. Because it appears like the word world is being stored somehow. I just don't know how that works. So I'm going to do that. I'll enter hello world again. And word 1 is world. Now, I'm a little bit suspicious about a couple of things here. So I don't know, it doesn't seem logical to me that there is a null terminator at the end of that second word. Because although it's weird that word count goes up, the value of word count is actually not the total number of words, it's the index of the last valid word. I guess there's nothing wrong with ChatGPT doing it that way. What I am a bit skeptical about is, here is where I add a null terminator. And I add a null terminator just before I increment word count. And word count equals 1 when I'm done, which means it seems to me like I only have 1 null terminator in the whole program that I'm adding myself. And that looks a little bit suspicious. But then you might look at this and say, why does the program work? If I'm not adding it, so my suspicion is I'm not adding a null terminator to the second string. So why does it work then? I mean, and this is a common complaint. I'm actually glad we had this moment because often on midterm questions and assignment questions, people don't put a null terminator in and I take a bunch of marks away and they come back and say, but how could you do that? The code still works. The code might still work, but that's a coincidence. I'm going to try something. I'm going to delete my debugging statement. I'm going to initialize my words array to contain a bunch of garbage. And we know that it's our responsibility. This program does not initialize that array. So if I initialize the array to contain a bunch of garbage, then the program should on its own overwrite that garbage with something meaningful. So I'll do for int j equals 0, j is less than 20, j plus plus. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use garbage that makes sense in a character sense. So I'm going to say words ij equals, let's choose a character. I'm going to use this symbol here. If I see any of these symbols in my output, then somebody isn't managing the strings correctly. And I now, I sort of regret what I just did. I actually would like to print out those words myself again. So int j equals 0, j is less than the word count, less than, I guess we're doing less than or equal to for some reason, j plus plus. I'm going to print out the value of each word. Word is this. So there's j, there's words sub j. And I'm going to run that. Enter a sentence, hello world. And this is the problem that I was referring to. So notice how word 0 is exactly what we expect. Even though I'm deliberately messed up the array, word 0 is fine because I add all the characters, the code adds the characters just fine, and then it adds a null terminator. But I don't add a null terminator to word number 1. The reason why word number 1 seemed to be fine before was that just by a nice coincidence, it happened to be the case that there was a bunch of null terminators just already in the memory there. So the code worked by accident. And of course, that means there was a bug. If the code doesn't always work, if it depends on weird random factors, then the code doesn't work. It only works if it always works. Okay, so now working backwards from this, let's fix the other bug. So the other bug was this getS. I'm going to fix that to use fgetS again. So I'm just going to rewrite that. I already talked about how to use fgetS. That's no longer a bug. All right, so I'm going to run this and the question now is, okay, so hello world, ASDF. It seems like the final word in the list gets really messed up. The question is, where exactly is that happening? Like if I had to blame that on a specific line, where would it be? It says there are bugs on 2 lines. So I don't know. I think I'm going to blame it on line 25. It just seems to me as if that's a good representative of what we need is essentially to do this. Well, maybe I'll demonstrate my fix first. So my idea is this is the code that we run when we're done with a word. Currently, this code only runs if I hit a space character. The problem is, what if there's still a word going when I finish my sentence and there's no space at the end of the sentence? Well, to me, it sounds like what I should do is just add the word down here, pretty much. There's a caveat that I don't think is relevant to this example, which is, well, wait, what if I just started a new word? What if there was a space at the end of the sentence? In my opinion, this logic essentially mimics the logic that I would need is happening inside of a sentence, because it seems like in this code, when I have a bunch of spaces next to each other, we consider those to be a bunch of empty words. So that's why I'm doing it this way. Let's give this a try. Hello world. And it says, okay, word number 0 is hello, word number 1 is world, and you can see here that the \n got folded into the word world, and then word number 2 is uninitialized. Okay, I hadn't considered that. So I could the reason I hadn't considered that is this less than or equal to sign that ChatGPT wants to use, or starting the indexing at a different place, isn't the way I would have written this. So I'm actually going to backtrack. Maybe my solution isn't the cleanest way of fixing it. It would be if I made a couple of other modifications, but I've just noticed another trick that I could use, which is notice how at the end of this I see a new line. That's because fgetS, as you know from reading files, fgetS puts new lines at the end of the string that it reads in when you read up to a new line. So what I could do is I could say, look, if you hit a new line, then I also want you to stop the word. So end the word immediately if you hit a space or if you hit a new line. This is not a clean solution in my mind, but it is the solution that I think fixes the code I was given the most efficiently. So I'll enter hello world. And it looks like that. Did I recompile? Yep, it looks like that still has, yeah, actually that's going to create the same problem I just have. So now if I hit a new line, I still go down here and add an null terminator and then increment word count, which again results in word count being incorrect because of this weird way that it does word count. So I'm going to leave it this way. And what I'm going to do at the end is, so basically, the real problem isn't that word 2 is blank. There isn't a word 2. The problem is that when I'm outputting my words, I should be counting up to but not including word count, because word count is the number of words, not the index of the last valid word. So I do that here. I go up to word count. Now this code looks like what I would write. And similarly here, when I'm indexing into my words, I want to index starting at the last valid index, not at the valid of word count, because if there are 6 words, the last index should be 5. So I'll make this fix here. Okay, so I'll type hello world again. So it turns out, I guess, that the solution was sort of halfway between what I originally thought of and what I came up with next. Okay, so there's my modified sentence. Now, observe that originally the code seemed to work. It wasn't until I added all these hash symbols that I noticed the problem. And the problem is, I guess, a couple of different issues with the way that the indexing works. In my opinion, there are more than 2 lines with bugs, but whatever. Let's go see what ChatGPT has to say. Actually, why don't I first ask it to look at my code and see whether it thinks my code is correct. I'm going to get rid of this initializing loop because that was just for debugging purposes. I'm going to run it quickly to make sure that it works. So we'll do hello world, ASDF. Okay, it looks like that works. I think that the burden of proof is a bit lower when you're testing after debugging like this, which is to say, I suspect that the code that ChatGPT, I guess in theory, when it wrote this code, to the extent that it knows how to write anything, it was able to do its own testing. So I don't have to do as exhaustive testing as it would be doing because I'm debugging the code. I'm not doing full testing from scratch. Testing somebody else's code from scratch is a very common task to do. There are people whose job it is just to take other people's code and test it. And that can be helpful because if somebody else is testing your code, they might try different things than you tried. But we're not trying to mimic that. We're just trying to do some debugging. So I'm going to head over here. I'm going to say, here is my attempt at fixing the code. Let me know if this is correct. Keeping in mind that ChatGPT might lie to you about this, but we'll just see what it says. Your attempt looks correct. You've made the necessary modifications to handle input and consider the new line character \n. I'm taking this as a hint that maybe it thought that the 2 bugs that it was looking for occurred on this line, line 14 and line 8. I consider the bugs to have occurred in different places. So I actually consider that this, line 25, is, if not the cause, then certainly a symptom of a bug. It should not be starting its indexing at word count. As we know, if we're counting the number of things that exist, the last index should always be 1 less than that. So if I'm indexing in, I shouldn't be indexing at this index. I consider this to be more of a bug than line 14, although line 14 might be the root cause of some of the bugs, but as we saw, that I had to do a couple of other modifications. But okay, I'll buy that. Additionally, reducing the loop for printing words in reverse order is the right approach. What do you mean by, we'll just copy that. This doesn't make any sense. I didn't reverse the order of that loop. That loop is the same loop you gave me. I just changed the indexing. I didn't reverse the order of that loop. Okay, now book it. ChatGPT is going to say, oh, I agree. I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. I apologize. You are correct. I don't know. I misspoke in my previous response. That's enough of this, okay? You don't have to apologize. It's okay to make a mistake. Don't just apologize every time I talk to you. Fine. Okay. So that was good. That was a good debugging exercise. And I think maybe I'm trying my luck, but let's try one more. Those last 2 exercises were great. Can you generate one more? Don't show me the solution. Absolutely. Okay, so, problem specification. This is nice because this will bring us back to an exercise we already did. Write a program that takes a string as input and determines whether it's a palindrome or not. A palindrome is a string that reads the same forwards and backwards, ignoring spaces and capitalization. So recall that we actually did this exercise a while back. So the basic palindrome exercise is sort of a midterm strength exercise. This version could be on an exam, but it's pretty complicated. Here's my incorrect implementation. I'm reasonably confident that there actually are bugs in this, finally. I mean, like, it is, after all this time, it does look like ChatGPT is now understanding. So we'll see if I get burned. Number of lines with bugs, 2 lines contain bugs. Okay, well, let's take a crack at it. So we'll copy this. We'll head over here. We'll paste it in here. And I'll save it. I'm going to try compiling it. Now, I noticed that, as usual, it thinks this is a freebie. To be honest, this seems sort of like earlier when I asked it for syntax errors, it kept deleting semicolons. It seems to have figured out that if I want there to be bugs in string code, it just has to add getS, and that does the trick. So there's apparently one other bug, but let's see if we can find it organically. I already have a suspicion of where it might be. So we'll do practice number 6. Okay, so of course it complains about getS. I'll get to that in a minute. Practice debugging 6. Enter a string. Okay, so what are some palindromes? I'm going to ask it for some palindromes. I'm going to go over, and I think it gave me one. I think level is a palindrome from earlier. The input is a palindrome. Okay, what about lever? That is not a palindrome. Okay, it's finding palindromes that way. What about a man, a plan, a canal, Panama? Nope, not Panama. Panama. That is not a palindrome. So I'm going to ask ChatGPT. The specification it gave is a little bit vague, but it does say ignoring spaces and punctuation. Am I correct to assume that a man, a plan, a canal, Panama, and actually if I add punctuation, it should be a man, comma, a plan, comma, a canal, comma, and then Panama should be capitalized, is a palindrome by the definition you gave for the exercise, or for according to the specification. We'll see what it says. It should say yes, because it was before. Yes, that is considered a palindrome. Okay, so I'm now going to, and it says, keep in mind that the program should be able to correctly identify it. I think I get the hint there. Let's copy this exact text, exactly what ChatGPT said should be a palindrome, and plug it in. And so I'll paste that, and it says no. Now, I think that's the other bug. The first bug is fgetS. So I'm going to say, I'm just going to fix the fgetS call. It's going to take input, the size is 100, and it's taking it from standard input. Okay, that fixes our getS problem. I'm even going to ask ChatGPT to verify that line 8 was one of the bugs. Is one of the bugs on line 8? And then don't tell me where the other bug is. Let's see. Yes, one of the bugs is on line 8. You're on the right track. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you. That's good encouragement. Let's head back over here and keep up that good work that we're doing. The other bug, to be honest, it's sort of clear what the problem is here. The other bug is that we're not ignoring punctuation, I guess, or we're not ignoring spaces. This loop is a little bit unusual looking. You'll recall, or you can go back and look at that video, when we wrote the code to solve this problem ourselves, we didn't write this. We wrote a different loop. This loop is trying to take advantage, it's doing some simplifications that are quite logical, I think. So if we do the word radar, R-A-D-A-R, null terminator, what ChatGPT is doing here is, you'll notice that it's using only one index variable, and it's doing some sort of strange indexing, and it's the limit of the loop is length over 2. I think that that's all valid. So here's what it's doing. It's realizing that, and some people, when they designed their own solution to the is palindrome problem, might have figured this out. But if I want to test if something's a palindrome, what I could do is sort of think of there being like a mirror halfway through the string, and I index into the string up to the halfway point. That's what this is all about. And at each step, I find the corresponding index the same distance away from the end. So I'll draw it like this. So if I'm at index 0 here, no, I'll draw that. Index 0, the corresponding index is index length minus 1. So length, if I is 0, then length minus I minus 1 is length minus 1. So that would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So length is 5, length minus 1 is 4. I ask, is R equal to R? Yes. And I move along, I increment, and now I do length minus 1 minus 1. So I is 1 now. And I ask, is A equal to A? So it's doing this clever thing where it's not going through the whole string, it's just going through the string up to halfway, and it's just noticing that it can compare the string by sort of folding it in half. This part I think is valid. I don't see an issue with this. There could be an issue lurking in there, but I don't see an issue with this. I think that the other bug, although I don't want to give it a line number, the other bug is that it's not ignoring spaces and punctuation. Now, the problem becomes a lot more difficult if you ignore spaces and punctuation. So the trick ChatGPT is using, the sort of mirror image trick, doesn't work properly if you have to ignore spaces and punctuation, because you can end up in a situation where the string has a space at the beginning and then you need two different index variables. So I'm going to sort of phone this in. Because we already solved the full version of this problem in a different video, I'm not going to generate the fixed version of this code. I am going to verify with ChatGPT that that is the bug, and then we'll call it a day. If you want the fixed version of the code, go look at the previous video on string exercises where I did this. I can't put an exact line number on this, but is the second bug the lack of handling? That's not a good way of writing that. But the program does not properly ignore spaces and punctuation. Is that the second bug? Now, of course, it likes to agree with me, so maybe it'll agree on general principle. You're correct. The program not properly ignoring spaces and punctuation is indeed the second bug. You've identified both issues in the code. Now is the time to fix them. It's not the time, it doesn't say that I need to fix them this time. If I recall correctly, if I go up here, let's see, if I scroll up to, what was that, exercise 1 or something? Let's see. Now, go ahead and work on fixing those bugs. See, it told me to do it. It used a very specific, I guess, active phrase. Here it uses the sort of passive voice. Now it's the time to fix them. I'm going to interpret that to mean that it's not my job to fix them. Okay, can you go ahead and fix those bugs and show me the result? Oh, I forgot to ask that as a question, but I'm sure it understands. I stated it as a command. Certainly, here's the corrected version. Here's the corrected version of the code. So it creates an input array. It uses fgetS instead of using getS. It doesn't give the size as the number 100. It uses the sizeof operator. This is a valid use of sizeof, but I've warned you before that sizeof isn't all it's cracked up to be. It doesn't work the way that people think it does, so be careful about using it. But this is a valid use. In the length equals string length minus 1. This is a little bit sloppy, so fgetS inserts the new line character into the string that it reads. We saw that in the previous exercise. In my opinion, if you want to ignore that new line, you should just go and delete it from the string yourself. What this is doing is just pretending it's not there by backing the string up by one character. That's a little bit dangerous, because what if there isn't a new line? Like, what if the user input just ends suddenly? But okay, I think that wouldn't lose marks on a midterm. And then what we do is we've got oh, yuck. Okay, this code is incorrect. Oh no, wait, no, it's good. Sorry, it's disgusting looking, but it looks correct. Okay, I misread where this comma was. So the code looks correct, and in fact, just to prove it, that I made my call was too quick there. Let's go over and try running it ourselves. So I'll just paste this over, and we'll save it, and we'll try running it. And we can see it does compile, and we'll try doing this and practice debugging number 6. A man, a plan, a canal, Panama, exclamation point, and the input is a palindrome. And just to be clear, radar is a palindrome and lever is not a palindrome. Okay, I think the code is correct now. So ChatGPT did fix it. I'm going to save that incorrect code so I can use it later if I want it for anything. So what it's doing here is, I mentioned in passing that if you want to detect if you have a palindrome without by ignoring spaces and punctuation, you need 2 index variables, and that mirror image trick doesn't work. It looks like what ChatGPT has written, although it's dense, is doing that. So it's using two index variables, I and j, probably I being the first index, like on the left, and j being the index on the right. And it's going to keep going until I and j bump into each other. And then it increments I and decrements j at each step. This for loop definition is pretty cryptic. And we talked in a previous video about generating cryptic code if you want to annoy people. And if you're now reading this, maybe you're annoyed. That means it's achieving its desired effect. I think there are better ways to write this. Yes, it works, and yes, this is valid, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's easy to read. The variable names don't add anything to that. So what we're now doing is we're skipping over any non-letter characters in the way, incrementing I. We're also backing up our index j, skipping over any non-letter characters. And then we're just asking to make sure that I and j match up. So that once we've skipped over non-letters and punctuation, that the next letter in on either side, once I convert it to lowercase, matches. So this is actually also a model solution, one version of a solution to that earlier exercise that we did involving detecting palindromes. I think, and this might just be my bias, but I think the code that I wrote is easier to understand than this. And I suspect that all of you, if you tried solving that exercise on your own, would also write code that's a lot easier to understand than this. But whatever, we found the bug, we fixed it, or I told you how to fix it by going and looking at the exercise from previously, and ChatGPT could fix it as well. So we did the debugging. How we take care of the fix, I guess there is some difference of opinion. Okay, that was good. We actually got it to give me debugging exercises. I think I should ask for some more on our next topics like structured data as well, but I'll do that in some other video.